Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Overcaffeinated and Dysfunctional. We're your host. I'm David.
I'm Josh.
Make sure to give us a follow on YouTube, X, TikTok, and Spotify. Click the link tree in the description for all the links to our social media. Be sure to like and subscribe for all new episodes. Welcome back to episode 4. Josh, what do we got in store today?
Well, David, we got in store today the First Amendment and world conflicts. We're going to break down the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israeli and Hamas war, and the recent Venezuelan drug boats.
Ooh, that sounds like a good day. Before we start that conversation, we're going to introduce the new segment of our show called In the Hot Seat. During this segment, we will answer one of our viewers' questions. Each host will have 60 seconds to answer the question. The question today comes from a viewer from our email, Steve. Steve says, do you think it is more of a failure on the president or Congress when it comes to the government shutdown? Josh, you're going to go first, and your time starts now.
It's a great question from Steve. So it's a two-parter. Yes, the president has a role in it in our new government because the president helps put in place the policy that sets forth both foreign and domestic agendas. Now, Congress has a bigger play in it, though. Congress is the holder of the purse. So, because Congress can't come together and vote on a bipartisan bill or a continuing resolution, I believe the majority of the fault does fall on Congress. So, David, with that, I'm going to end my side.
Wow, you cut 20 seconds off that, by the way. First time.
That's the first time for me, I know.
Did you cut your windpipe short?
So, with that, I'm going to turn the question back to you, and you are now in the hot seat.
Okay, Josh. Well, I think it's both, right? Like, the president does have a role to play here, but if you look at the information regarding this government shutdown, where the fact the Republicans have given the Democrats a clean continuing resolution, what does that mean? That means the same bill that the Democrats signed 13 times to continue funding until they can come up with an agreement on a whole funding package. They've signed this bill 13 times under Joe Biden. Why not now? Why are they trying to fill this bill with all, partisan spending? So when you break it down and look at it, I would hold Congress 100% liable, to this shutdown as we stand today. And that's my opinion right there. So who is held liable? The Democrats in Congress signed the bill today.
Yeah, no, as we're speaking now, it is 12 days?
Yeah, I think we're in 12 days now. Government shutdown. People are going without eating, without getting paid. People can't pay their bills. Cars are being repoed. People are getting eviction notices. I mean, this is unnecessary.
Yeah. And if you remember in our podcast, I don't want to get too far into this as we've got a whole slated agenda, but it's $300 million to $1 billion per day. So on the small side, we're at $3.6 billion lost in revenue. And on the large side, $12 billion.
And how much do you think in, people's checks and how much people's bank accounts, how much have we lost total in the consumers of America?
It's a lot, but yet you still see Congress getting paid. I love that one.
Still getting paid. The checks are still rolling and they're still going home on the weekend. Don't forget that.
Yeah, no, they should be locked in the chambers to do that. But enough on that topic. We can cover more on that one later. First Amendment. So we will start off with the reading of the First Amendment. First Amendment explanation is Congress shall not make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So with our First Amendment, we get to do things like you and I are doing right now, talk about what we believe is going on in society and voice our grievances.
Absolutely.
And actually, if you look at our Declaration of Independence, after the preface, it is a redress of the grievances against the king. Now, fun fact for you, David, did you know that the Bill of Rights was not originally planned to be in the Constitution?
Well, Josh, no, I did not know that.
So, the Federalists, there were two sides. The Federalists were starting the constitutional movement, and this was brought up at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. Federalists argued against the Bill of Rights. And I'm going to read what James Madison. Now, something you have to realize when you read the Federalist Papers is they all went under the name of Publius, which we can go into a further explanation of how the Federalist and Anti-Federalist Papers were written. But this was authored by James Madison. But a minute detail of a particular rights is certainly far less applicable to a constitution like under the consideration, which is merely intended to regulate the general political interests of the nation, than to constitute, which has the regulation of every species of personal and private concern. If therefore the loud clamors against the plan of the convention on this score are well founded, no emphasis of reprobation will be too strong for the constitution of this state. But the truth is that both of them contain all which, in relation to their objects, is reasonably to be desired. I go further and affirm the Bill of Rights in the sense and in the extent in which they are contended for are not only unnecessary in the proposed Constitution, but would even be dangerous. They would contain various exceptions to powers which are not dangerous. They would contain various exceptions to powers which are not granted, and on this very account would afford colorable pretext to claim more than were granted. For why declare things that shall not be done, which there is no power to do? So a quick excerpt of that, he's basically saying, why are we putting these things in the Constitution when the government has no power to do so to begin with? And I'll start with you, David. What would this country look like today if we did not have these specific laid out protected rights?
Well, whether you want to believe it or not, we would be like North Korea, where you couldn't say anything. You couldn't speak out like you and I are now, having our own opinions. You couldn't talk against the government. You couldn't have the freedom to religion, the freedom of the press. None of that would exist without the Bill of Rights and without the Constitution, whether you want to agree with it or not. If you think the politicians in D.C. would still grant you the same rights you have now, not having your constitutional protected rights, you're drinking the Kool-Aid. You are drinking the Kool-Aid. What is your thoughts there, Josh? Anything to add to that?
I understand where James Madison was coming from. So looking back in time and looking at how it was contextualized, I understand what he was saying, because the government of original was not set to have the power like it does today. Do you believe it was meant in a harmful way, his writing, or was he just stating a outwardly fact?
No, I think he was stating a fact and saying, listen, if we didn't have this, this is what would happen. And the one thing that, the founders did when they were writing all these Bill of Rights and the Constitution was they thought about everything. They thought about not just what's going on now, but what the future would look like and the future of America. And I think, like I said, he had to have thought, if we don't have these rights, we wouldn't go nowhere.
Well, he didn't actually think that. So, the Anti-Federalist argues for the Bill of Rights. George Mason, in the Constitutional Convention of 1787, there is no declaration of any kind for preserving liberty of the press, the trial by jury in the civil cases, nor against the danger of standing armies in times of peace. So he's arguing for all of this in the Anti-Federalist, and he's not the only one. Now, just for some background information on him, who was George Mason? George Mason was an American planter, politician, founding father, and delegate to the U.S. Constitution Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, where he was one of 3 delegates who refused to sign the Constitution. His writings, including substantial portions of Fairfax Resolves of 1774, the Virginia Declaration of Rights in 1776, and his objections to the constitutional government of 1787. So, a background look at it, the Anti-Federalists wanted a more Republican or Republic style government, and they didn't mean harm by rejecting the Constitution. They wanted certain compromise, and this is now known as the Federalist Compromise, because if you go look back, even James Madison's opinion on it changed.
So what would a more republic version of the Constitution, what would that actually look like?
A republic, when looking at it, would have actually changed the dynamic of this whole country. Now, you hear it was our destiny to move westward. If we went to a full republic-style government, we actually would not be anywhere this big. We would have stayed in the Northeast and the Southeast, that whole Eastern Seaboard.
Okay.
Now, even James Madison walks this back in a letter in 1789, While the Constitution remains unratified and it was necessary to unite the states in a someone plan, I opposed all previous alterations as calculated to throw the states into dangerous contentions and to furnish the secret enemies of the Union with an opportunity of promoting dissolution. He went on to say, circumstances are now changed. The Constitution is established and amendments pursued with a proper moderation and its proper mode will be not only safe, but may serve a double purpose of satisfying the minds of the well meaning opponents and of providing additional grounds in favor of liberty. So he did a full 180, but this was the Federalist Compromise. He came back and said, actually, it might serve a dual purpose because at this time it had not been ratified across all of the states. He did this as like a, hey, I'm going to ratify these in the Constitution if you guys can sign on. And his letter was actually dated about a year prior to everything being ratified. Bill of Right was ratified December 17th of 1791, and his letter was written early 1789. So he was already in the process of doing this, and states were in the process of ratifying. Now, we break it down even further and go, why is freedom of speech important? And I'm going to quote our founder for this, first president George Washington. If freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. What do you think he is trying to say in that excerpt?
Well, without freedom of speech and able to think for yourself, you're led to believe what you're told, right? So, like, if I'm the leader, right, and I tell you the sky is purple, and you disagree with that, you have no freedom to do so. So I would lead you to the slaughter. You know exactly. You literally have to take that quote for its literal context, with no other context, literal meaning. If freedom of speech is taken away, you have no right to speak. Then dumb and silent we may be led. You only know what you're told, so you're dumb, right? You're not smart, like sheep to the slaughter, you know. And without without the freedom of speech, the basic right to speak your mind, to think what you want, freedom of religion, freedom of the press. Without any of that, you would have to believe what you're told. It's just like North Korea. You go look at the government in North Korea. You have to believe everything they tell you. You know, people who run from North Korea, when they come here, they don't realize how different life is because all they know is what they're told.
So then I would have to say, what? Because this has become a big thing now where, well, I thought it was freedom of speech, especially with the Jimmy Kimmel, I think it was. What's the difference now between the left coming out and saying, oh, that's a violation? But not too long ago, they were putting conservative speech to the wayside on high platforms like X. It's well known that they were told not to publicize conservative values. So, what's the difference now? Why does the left care so much now that it's turned around? The tables have turned.
Well, I think it's because of the situation going on, right? And what the problem with the left is if they don't agree with you, they silence you and cancel you. That's the biggest problem. So when it benefits them the most, that's when they support that the most. You know, freedom of speech doesn't mean you can go out and wish death on people. That's there. You know, there's limits to these rights, and there's limits to what you can say or can't do. And I don't think a lot of people on the left realize that.
Yeah. So, freedom of speech is free. Like, you are free to say it. But just because you say it does not mean you're free of consequence. You know, if we came out on air and chanted something absolutely prolific, yeah, we'd get canceled for it. There's people have done it before. They've gotten canceled for saying something outwardly outrageous. So why does it matter now? Is it because you're seeing the consequence side of it and you're acting like little children having a temper tantrum and can't handle the fact that what you just said had negative consequence?
Yeah, and there's 5 limitations to the freedom of speech, right? When you think about it, you got the enticement to imminent lawless actions, defamation, right? You could be sued for defaming somebody or slandering somebody, obscenity, spreading bad stuff, committing a threat, an active threat, saying you want to hurt somebody. That's where the limitations of freedom of speech, drops right there. And then the copyright infringement. You can't take someone else's work and claim it's yours. Those are the only limitations of freedom of speech. Unless I'm missing something, if you have anything to add there.
I wouldn't say that it's a limitation because you can always continue to say it. What I will say is everything, it's like Newton's law. Everything has an equal and or greater reaction. So if you do something, you need to expect there to be an equal reaction to it. Either it's going to be a good one or it's going to be a bad one, depending on what side of the spectrum you're on. If you go inside a riot, your reaction might be you go to jail for inciting a riot. You have consequences. Just because you are free to say it does not mean you're free of consequence.
And that shows, perfect with, people who are canceled, Jimmy Kimmel. And to be honest, I don't know what he exactly said or did, so I'm not really too familiar with that. I don't really want to touch on that too much. But like, if you're a live host and you own a television show and you say something that's, you have the right to say it, but there's consequences for your actions and what you say. What is the saying? You do the crime, you do the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that goes back to now this gentle parenting we see on the liberal side of things. I've seen plenty of videos where this little kid comes up and smacks their mom, and mom's like, I know you have big feelings, but you can't hit mama. No, smack that child back and teach them. They can't be doing that. It's the same thing. If I go hit someone on the street, there's going to be consequences. If I say something outright outrageous and that's ill advised, there's going to be consequences. So, if you got fired for saying something about Charlie Kirk, I hate it. I don't like that you got fired, but you created the action, which created a counteraction. You have to accept it. If you weren't ready to accept it, don't say anything.
Right. No, I agree, And there's a difference between disciplining a child and abusing a child. You
Yes.
discipline your child, with the goal of disciplining a child is to guide and teach the child of appropriate behavior. It's not to
And there's
instill
consequences.
that too, but it's not to instill fear or pain. So, if your child, I don't know, if you catch your child playing with a lighter, right? Take the lighter away and smack him in his hand. That's disciplining. Now, to take your belt off, pull his pants down, and whip his ass, that is abuse. That's where the line is drawn.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a clear line between abuse and correction. Like you said with a lighter, even something might be, if we did something, it was go stand in the corner or you're grounded. It's the same way if you go light something on fire right now. I'm technically being grounded. We just have a more harsh term for it. It's called arson in jail. But it's the same. You learn consequence.
Yes, that's true. 3 hots and a cot, right?
Yep. You have the free will to do something, but you've got to be able to accept the consequence that may or may not come with it. Now, we're talking about the First Amendment broadly here, and inside of that is freedom of religion. Now, I have 2 parts to this. So, freedom of religion, I believe, was infringed on one specific person that I now wholeheartedly support, Neil McDonough. Do you know much about Neil McDonough, David?
No, I don't. I don't know anything about him.
So Neil McDonough came out in Hollywood in the early 2000s and had said, I'm not going to kiss anyone on TV. That's against my Christian beliefs. I don't want my kids seeing me kiss another woman, and I don't want to be unfaithful to my wife. He pretty much got blacklisted from Hollywood for it. For years, he lost everything, cars, house, you name it. He recently came back, and now he owns his own studio group, but that's an infringement of freedom of rights, I believe. You're blacklisting him because he's making a stand for his rights. What do you believe do you think that was wrong? And it's not only against the Christian belief. I believe it's the same for Islam, Judaism, Buddhism. But what's your belief on that as far as that goes? Was that a violation of his freedom of religion?
Being punished for believing in his religion. That's what you're saying, right? So
yes.
No, I think it's completely wrong. You should. In America here, we have the freedom to religion, right? And there's a reason why we have church and state are separate, right? Religion and church and state are separate. And you have the right to practice your religion, like you and I, we're Christians and we believe in, the one Lord Jesus Christ. But that doesn't make, because we believe that, doesn't mean that Muslims have to believe that. Doesn't mean, other religions have to believe that. Now, being in America, you have the right to practice the religion that you believe in, and nobody can punish you for what you believe in. If one day we all woke up and they said, if you were a Christian and you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, you can no longer go to Walmart no more. Let's just say, for an example, that's wrong. Or Josh, you believe in Jesus Christ, so now business that you spent your whole life and your blood, sweat, and tears to develop and keep afloat. Now, because you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, we're taking that job away from you. That's not how it works here in America.
Now, just to be play both sides of the aisle because we were just talking about it. Do you believe this could fall under the consequence side of it, of coming out and being a supporter of your religion, or in our case, an evangelist? Do you think that could be a negative consequence, like talking out would be if you got fired for saying something your company didn't like?
And that's the problem I have too, because a lot of when it comes to HR, right? They say there's two things in work you don't talk about: religion and politics. But being a Christian, I believe that might violate your constitutional right. You have the right to religion. So what you're telling me is, if my religion tells me that I have to pray at noon every day and I'm working, I can't pray at noon because I have to keep that separate from work. I have a problem with that. I think that's a clear, blatant violation. But what do you think there?
So, just to make sure I'm getting what you're saying correctly, you believe this is an exception under that same rule of consequences, the negative and positive equal reaction.
Sorry, I didn't even answer your question. No, yes, no, no. I think that you should not be getting a negative reaction based off of what you practice.
So, it should be synonymous or without regard, basically, when you say
Without
something.
regard or without discrimination. Yeah, you shouldn't be your religion, right? Your belief, whether you believe in if you're a Muslim and you believe in Allah, or if you believe in whatever you believe in, period, the end. You should not be discriminated or canceled or held. That shouldn't be a reason to determine your character. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. No, I agree, and that one would be an exception to the fact
Now
because
let me ask you this question now. Now, what do you believe if, with HR and stuff, they tell you, keep religion separate from work. Now, if you were a practice any religion, let's just say any religion, no matter what it was, and your religion require you to pray at noon every day, and HR tells you you have to keep religion separate from work, do you believe that's a clear, blatant violation of the First Amendment?
100% without a doubt. There shouldn't be anything abridging or causing infringement to your right to religion. If your religion and you're devoutly in that religion tells you, hey, you need to lay down, look at the sky, and pray every day at 12, 3, 4, and 7, you should be able to do that.
So what do we do? What would you say we do to fix this problem? The problem where we allow corporations that pay us essentially to tell you, hey, no, you can't practice your religion while you're working. What
Tell
do you
them
feel
to
about?
mind their own business.
For instance, one of me and my coworkers every day we look up the verse of the day and we tell each other, hey, this is the verse of the day, and we talk about it for a few minutes. When we have time, and we're still doing our work. We're not screwing around. Obviously, work comes first, but we talk about the verse of the day, and then one of my coworkers say, "Hey, do you know that you shouldn't be talking about religion and work? It's prohibited." Why is spreading the gospel of our Lord, why is that a problem? Funniest part is the person that said this is a devout Christian, but because the HR handbook says you can't do it, it's a problem. He's a devout Christian, but because the HR handbook says keep politics and religion separate, you can't even say, hey, Josh, the verse of the day, Psalms 34, 12 through 13. Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking lies. That is prohibited in the workplace. Why is that prohibited?
Doesn't make sense.
It's a violation.
It is. And I believe people should mind their own business. If you don't, in this case, if it doesn't pertain to you and you don't want to listen to it, just let them be. Let them be. Let them do what they're going to do. Is it hurting anyone? No. And I've got my verse of the day, Psalm 18:12. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my savior. My God is my rock in whom I find protection. He is my shield, the power that saves me, and my place of safety. I don't get how any of this would be banned from the workplace. Again, it doesn't affect anybody but the people talking about it. And if you don't want to be involved in the conversation, go somewhere else. There's no reason to start an argument about it. If someone wants to ask a question, just do it in a respectful manner. Be respectful to the person's religion. That's all you got to do. So a company getting involved and saying you can't talk about it in the workplace, BS. Because like our scripture says, go into the square, go into the market square and profess my name. If I want to talk about Jesus in the middle of a work day, I'm going to. And if a company has a problem with that, they can take it up with me.
Yeah, deny me now, I'll deny you later. That's one
Yeah,
of the things.
deny me to someone else, and I will deny you before the Father. And another thing, he says, if they hate you, remember they hated me first. So if
That's
someone
true.
hates me for it, I'm in good company.
Amen. Amen. So now we go on to the next start of the first, the next part of the First
Well,
Amendment here.
hold on. I got one more question as far as
Okay.
the freedom of religion.
All right, shoot.
Is the separation of church and state really needed?
I think it is. Yes, I think it is. There's a reason why church and state, because if you didn't have church and state separate, then if you didn't agree with what the state decided for the religion, Christianity or Muslim or, there's a million other religions out there, atheist, satanic, whatever. If you didn't agree with what the state sets forth, you don't have a right to think otherwise. That defeats the whole purpose of the First Amendment.
No, I agree with the separation of powers between state and church. And the reason is if you go back and you look at 16th, 17th, 18th century Europe, and even before that, the Roman Catholic Church pretty much ran the European governments. So I 100% agree. They used to have a bunch of really iffy stuff inside of that. So I do agree with the separation of church and state. Now, like you were going on to, freedom of press.
Yeah, so the freedom of the press is the protected right to communicate and publish information and opinions without government censorship or interference. Now, I have something I want to talk about later on when we get into this, but we're going to get there. So, under this key aspects of, the freedom of the press, it protects you from government control, which means the government can't make laws to prevent you from freedom of the press, right? They can't make a law on tomorrow saying you can't talk about government shutdown because it makes us look bad. They can't do that. What else can't they do? You have the scope of the press. You can do it in any way you feel need. Newspaper, social media, television. You want to stand on the sidewalk and scream out your newspaper article? You're more than welcome to do so. Now, Josh, where do you think the freedom of the press comes inside of a democracy? What do you think is the benefit or con of having freedom of the press within our democracy?
Within whose democracy? Because we're not a democracy.
Okay, let me rephrase this then. Where do you think this fits in with our government and our
constitutional
freedoms?
Republic?
Yeah, okay, you want to put it like that? Fine, we'll put it like that. All right?
Well, that's how we're set up. We are a constitutional Republic.
Stop drinking so much espresso. You're so wired up over there. He had a triple shot, by the way.
So, inside of our constitutional republic, the press plays a pivotal role. They help get information spread out. Now, there's different parts of this. Like we now have the Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA, which now you can go submit FOIA requests to places like the CIA, the FBI, local PD, everywhere. It is public knowledge, public record, public information. And that's why we also have now presidential libraries. People ask, oh, what's the purpose of a presidential library? A presidential library houses all of the documents that a president touched. If he wrote hello on a napkin, it is in that presidential library. It's part of the Presidential Records Act of 69, if I remember correctly, just after Watergate. So, what are you laughing about over there?
I was going to ask you, is the napkin he used to wipe his mouth there too?
It might have. I don't know as far as that goes. That was more of an example. I don't know if you're going to find a napkin in there, but it plays a pivotal role. It allows us to get free-flowing information in regards to what's going on inside of our republic. If you were to try and stop that, I think you would also start getting rid of the freedom of assembly and the freedom of speech, which that's where the freedom of speech would come out, is if they started to take away freedom of press. That's when we would need to take the streets and make our voices vocal, redress the grievance. And that's the whole point of this amendment.
No, I agree. But do you think that within the freedom of the press, do you think there's a way to abuse it as newspaper articles putting out misinformation? And not misinformation like we could sue you for defamation, like just covering events based off so if I say today, or for instance, the White House came out and said that they had 200 soldiers in Israel at Central Command in Israel already. Then CNN went out and said, I believe it was CNN, they went out and said, oh, we deployed 200 people to 200 soldiers to Israel. They were already there. So, do you think the ability to twist and turn narratives is a problem?
100%. And this is where we need to go back and start. I'm going to say punishing with air quotes because I'm not inciting physical violence here. We need to stop giving our viewership to these journalistic agencies that aren't giving the full information in the correct lighting. Now, unfortunately, and this is why I've kind of stopped watching cable news and I go through third market to find all my information. Our news agencies like to purport or show off bad news first because it's what catches the eye. We need to report all news first off, whether it's good or bad. Two, we need to report it in the correct way. And there used to be this pride for a journalist doing the right form of journalism, and that's kind of gone away in the last ish years.
Yeah,
It
now
was
it's all about now is, filling getting the money from the donors, whoever's donating, funding these people. They play to their agenda and they play what benefits them and what makes them happy. And that's not how it should be. That's not how the freedom of the press was thought to be, during when the First Amendment was written.
No. Now we move on and we go further into this amendment, and it's the freedom of assembly. Now, the freedom of assembly is definitely an important area. It allows us to go out in public and peacefully protest and redress those grievances. Do you think what we've seen in 2020 Wisconsin, 2020 Baltimore, 2020 Portland, 2025 Los Angeles was protected under that freedom of assembly?
Think in some degree yes, and in some degree no, right? Like you had the right to be out there and protest, and you had the right to be there. But the second it turns violent, or the second there's threats flying, that's when you start crossing that threshold. Do you agree, or are we thinking alike here?
No, I agree. You are protected under the First Amendment as long as you are being peaceful. You have to stay peaceful in that. Nobody listens to aggravation or agitation. All it does is cause a further divide because you'll have some people that'll sympathize with it. And then you'll have your moderate majority be like, what are you doing? Why are you destroying our city? Because all of that has to be rebuilt and repaid for with tax dollars. Where does the tax dollars come from? You and I.
Working class.
So in this instance, there was a couple companies that fully moved out of neighborhoods during the 2020 riots, and people were like, "Why? You just caused them billions of dollars in damages. Why are they going to put that back in that place?" And then they claimed, "Oh, it's racist. They're doing it to a minority neighborhood." They had a reason for it. Just because it's in a minority neighborhood doesn't mean that's why they were doing it. They were doing it because the store was obliterated, looted. That's not peacefully protesting.
No, I agree, and look what's going on. This past week, I think it's still going on here in Oregon, Portland, Oregon, where they're protesting outside ICE facilities. Like to an extent, right? Like we agree you have the right to protest. The second you start throwing things or spitting on cops, trespassing on federal property, that's when your right to the freedom of assembly expires. When you start breaking other laws, when you're practicing your First Amendment to freedom to assembly, freedom to protest, freedom of speech, when you start breaking other laws, that's when the First Amendment expires on you. Because not expiring meaning you don't have that right still, but the right now, because you're breaking other laws, you're gonna face consequences, and that's when people are like, oh, this is the freedom of speech. No, it's not. Once you assault a police officer, that's a violation of another law. And I think what we're seeing over there is, if you don't agree with what's going on, the deportations, then protest peacefully. Go out there, take the streets, protest peacefully. And there's a reason we have the right to do so. But don't go out there and assault police officers, spit on police. They have a job to do, and they're just doing their job.
Yeah, no, and I would end this part of our segment by saying be engagers of your civic duty. Take that initiative and be forthright and be involved in your community politics, your local politics, your federal politics, your state. Be involved, redress those grievances if they're there. One of the ways you can also do that, you have the right to vote. If you don't like what's going on in your state, vote that person out.
And if you didn't vote, don't complain. Don't complain if you don't vote, because
Yeah, no, I'm
you're
gonna
not
be
making a difference.
I'm gonna be a little harsh here and frank, but I say your ballot is your bitch ticket. If you didn't fill out that bitch ticket, you don't have a right to be angry with what's going on. You didn't fulfill your half of this civil engagement, so you don't get a right to say what's going on in the country. Now, obviously, you do still get a right, actually speaking, but I'm less likely to listen to someone that doesn't vote than I am someone that does. Be
Absolutely.
civically engaged, be part of the change you want to see in this country.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's more people in this country who don't vote versus people who do vote, and it's a sad thing.
yeah, no, I 100% agree. Changing up the gears here a little bit from the First Amendment, we start talking about the Israeli Hamas war.
All right.
Basically, I'll have you lead this one off. Where did this all start from?
All right. So the history. So the Israel and Hamas, or let's bring this a step further. Israel and the Gaza Strip has conflicts that go back way, way, way beyond my time. So in the 1948 to the 1967, in 1948, the Arab-Israeli War followed Israel's declaration of independence in 1948. The war against a coalition of Arab states led to a mass displacement of Palestinians known as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. And during that time, there was a huge refugee crisis, right? And tens of thousands of Palestinians fled and were expelled from the Gaza Strip. And the Gaza Strip became densely under the Egyptian military control.
No, keep on going.
Okay. In 1967 to 2005, now we're going to look at this time frame. In 1967, there was a 60-day war. Israel took control of the Gaza Strip from Egypt, placing the Palestinian population under Israeli military control. Israel also established over 20 Jewish settlements within the Gaza Strip during this period. In 1987, the Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation coincided with the founding of Hamas. And then in 1993, the Oslo Accords transferred control of Gaza to the Palestinian Authority, although the peace efforts were hindered by Hamas attacking Israel and the instability which came from that. Now, in 2005, the Israel troops and settlers withdrew from Gaza, but Israel retained control over the airspace, coastline, and most of the border crossings. And then you look from 2006 to 2023, Hamas takes control. They take control of the Gaza Strip in 2006. Palestinian legislative elections. They won the legislative election they held in Gaza, and they seized control of the Gaza Strip. And then, the blockade and its impact. Israel and Egypt impose a blockade on Gaza, restricting movement to goods, which severely damaged the economy, leading to the high unemployment and poverty within the Gaza Strip. And then since then, there's been reoccurring conflicts. The blockade intentions led to significant conflicts between Israel and Hamas in 2008 from 2008 to 2014, roughly so. And then in 2023, October 7th, 2023, Hamas, the leaders of the Gaza Strip, right? They came over the border of Israel attacking their people. Oh, Josh, what do you think about Israel having control over the coastline, the airspace, and the border crossings? What do you think about that? Knowing that they don't control the strip itself, the Gaza Strip itself.
Well, I think that should be relegated to whoever owns the strip. And as far as the border crossing, I think that should be a dual partnership.
Right. No, I agree with that.
So it's a complicated area because it goes back so long. Now, if we look at recent facts, such as the October 7th attack, I don't think they helped their situation by making that attack. I mean, you go in on a Jewish holiday, they were all dancing around having concerts. You do a lot of damage to that area when they raided. They took what? Like 2,000 people as hostages?
They took 1,200 Israeli and foreign nationals. Let's see here. 46 U.S. citizens that were in Israel at the time were killed. 251 live hostages taken across the border into the Gaza Strip. So, I mean, we're not talking about going over the border, kidnapping a few people, killing a few people, getting out of there. I mean, this was a large-scale operation planned out.
Yeah. So, and then we look at the humanity of it, and now necessarily I don't agree 100% with what's going on, but I understand where Israel is coming from. Israel's defending its own. Israel had to have a large scale response to this issue. So, and you can't help that Hamas is using public places to harbor themselves. According to the Geneva Convention, attacks have to be primarily to military installation. Technically, that can be considered a military installation. I hate that it was in a kid's hospital. I don't believe they should have targeted it that way, but technically speaking, they had a right to target that hospital.
Now, do you think that do you think and again, we're gonna go based off the public opinion here. Do you think that Israel targeting Hamas targets in civilian populations, do you think that is considered a genocide?
No, I don't think what Israel's attempting to do is a genocide. Israel is attempting to fight back Hamas with the goal of eliminating Hamas.
They
As
have the
long as
full
they're,
right to do.
yes, they were attacked first. Let's make it clear. This was like a declaration of war. This would be the same thing as if Mexico came across the border tomorrow and attacked major U.S. population centers and then tried to escape back to Mexico. You better believe the US would be targeting Mexico with everything it had. And the only thing that gets public recognition is the surface to surface missile attacks. Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, were inside of Gaza doing smaller targeted operations. So it's not like they were just lobbing missiles in, just to lob missiles in wherever they could. That was the most painful. Another thing that Israel did, it made it harder for Israel to catch Hamas, but they did it out of respect to human life. They dropped leaflets telling people not to be there anymore ahead of the strike. So that's not a genocide. If you were trying to wipe out the Gazan people or the Palestinians, you wouldn't tell them, hey, I'm going to strike your major population center right here. Don't be here.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And there are, you know, and the thing I don't think people realize is there's a lot of misinformation when it comes to the Israeli war. News outlets are going to say things, and that's what we talked about earlier, right? The freedom of the press. Why aren't these people being punished when they when they report on a story the way that fits their narrative, right? And again, Israel's not targeting the civilian population; they're going after the Hamas. And again, we want to remember that Hamas was designated as a terrorist organization under the Trump administration. So these aren't just, we're not fighting back a government. We're fighting back a terrorist organization, an organization who committed a terrorist act on another country, another sovereign country. I mean, in this conflict, more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed so far. And, it's sad that that's had to happen. But again, why are these cowards hiding in the basement of children's hospitals? Why are they, hiding in in the basement of town hall? Why are they doing this? And they know why they're doing that, because they're doing it to make Israel look bad. 90% of Gaza's 2.1 million residents have been displaced. Most are facing unsanitary, overcrowded conditions alongside acute shortages of food, water, medical care, and other essential supplies and services. Why? Because Hamas came over the border on October 7th and started to kill the Jewish people.
So I'm going to say I believe Hamas is out, or not Hamas, but I 100% believe that Israel is justified in every action they have taken thus far. Now, is there some ill planning? There possibly might have been some ill planning on Israel's part, but I believe the majority of the responsibility for the deaths and the bloodshed that we have seen is on Hamas's hands. Now, and it's also the fault of Palestine. Palestine, Iraq, or sorry, not Iraq, but Iran, they're funding them. They're giving them weapons to fight this.
Other terrorist governments, every other terrorist form of governments. I mean, the
They're on the
Iranian
state-sponsored.
And you know what? And here's my thing. The left. Let's talk about this for a minute. The left, they're saying, free Palestine, free Palestine. If you look at the people out there protesting this stuff, if they were to go there, they would be taken out by Hamas. Everything they believe in goes against Hamas's thought process and the way they live life and the way that their religion is. Every part of that. You don't have freedom of speech over there. You don't have the freedom to be who you want, to love who you want. You don't have the right. You can't love who you want over there. You can't be who you want. You can't say what you want. So it's not like living in America and, it's not like Canada or Mexico coming to, invade us and us protecting ourselves and, our life is still the way it is. No, it's not like that. So if you want to, you have the right, again, you have the right to march to the streets and yell free Palestine. But if you were to go to Palestine, the people protesting this, most of them, if you were to go there, you would not be welcomed. They would not welcome you with open arms.
No, a lot of that is still under Sharia law, and that is some of the most gruesome law, especially towards women. So, going further into this war aspect, another global conflict that has been
Well,
plaguing the news.
before we go there, we do want to say that Israel and Hamas did agree to a broad peace deal in the last week, brokered by the Trump administration, and they have released hostages. Hostages are being released as we speak.
Remaining hostages, which was the primary key to the initial ceasefire deal.
Yeah, and Israel pulled back troops to a certain line. I don't know where the line was, but they pulled back their troops to a certain line, and it appears to be that the phase one of the, I think it's like 22 phases peace deal has started, and that's good news.
And I wish both sides luck on this. And I especially thank Egypt, Qatar for their assistance in this, because it definitely does take all of it, all of these nations that are in that area primarily. The United States cannot be the primary force brokering for a deal. So, on to the next side of things. We are now looking at the Russian-Ukrainian war. Now, to begin with, we have to look at the broad spectrum of everything. So, I'm going to start with the most forward recent action and work our way backwards. The start of this war started on February 24th of 2022. Russia led a full-scale invasion into Donetsk region of Ukraine with the original help of Belarus and now later on North Korea. I do have to say, when this originally played out, and I don't know what your feeling on this, David, is, but when this all first started happening, I thought it was some sort of AI little trick thing going on. It didn't seem real. What was your initial reaction to this?
I couldn't believe it. When I heard about this, I could not believe what I was seeing. You know, you hear about wars like World War One, these big wars, right, that happened on our ancestors' time. You know, great grandparents, whatever. I would never thought in our time we would see something like this, and I guess we're not seeing it, right, because we're not involved. But when another country invades another country and threatens their sovereignty, killing their people, I would have never thought I would have seen it. And like you said, I thought it was AI. I thought this was fake.
Yeah. As we progress, there is a history of Russian aggression. In some recent examples, 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed the Crimea region via a resolution conducted under the Obama administration. And in 2018, Ukraine officially named it occupied by the Russians. This was all part of the 2014-2018 Donbass War. Russia attempted an invasion on the country of Georgia as well. In 1943, as we step larger back, Soviet collapse was in the 90s. Soviets attempted to take on Finland, which, if you go look at that war, go look at the Russian-Finnish War, because the Finns, many props to them, absolutely obliterated the Soviets. But there is a history of this aggression. Now, Russia has also been saying that it wants to return to its former Soviet glory. What would that look like in today's geological climate? That would mean a return of Lithuania, Estonia, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, all back into Russia under that one guise of going back to the great Russian Empire that it used to be. What do we see now? What countries are involved? On the Ukrainian side, it's seen a lot of help from Australia, Austria, Argentina, the EU, NATO, Georgia, Israel, Jordan, Ireland, Cambodia, Cyprus, Malta, Morocco, the United States, Germany, New Zealand, Pakistan, South Korea, as just to name a few. Belarus and North Korea are the primary two countries that are involved with Russia on this conflict. When do you think we might see a stoppage in this war? Is there a stoppage, or do you think Russia's going to continue like it has been showing it's trying to with Poland?
You know, that's a really good question, and I don't see an end to this war anytime soon. And I think we're going to see other countries dragged into this. Why do I say that? Well, let's see. Let's look at the time. I think it was like a month or two ago. Putin came to Alaska, met with Donald Trump, and said, "Yes, I want peace." Right? Stood up in front of the American media and made us all think that we were going to get peace out of this. He gets on his little jet and flies back to Russia. And then the head of state puts out in the media that the leader of Ukraine isn't a legitimate president, or they're not a legitimate country. What do you mean? You were just here saying we're going to broker a peace deal, that we're going to see peace soon. And then you fly back to your country and it's the complete opposite. That right there is a huge fu to America right there. If that wasn't, I don't know what is. And then now we're seeing, and again, we want to remember that Poland's NATO territory. So now you have them flying drones and planes into NATO airspace. I think they're trying. This is going to be this. This is the start of, I believe, World War III. What do you think?
I would have to. I don't know if it's going to actually. You know what? I retract that. I think it might. And the reason I say it is because if somehow, some way, Poland does have to take true military action, it's already taken military action. What do I mean by true military action? If Russia starts flying fighters past Ukraine and into Poland, you're going to see Poland try and pull Article 5. What is Article 5? Article 5 is only relevant to NATO. Now, to remind people, NATO is 32 collective countries involving the United States that is actually right now posing for war. We are actively getting ready for this conflict just in case it does come to that. If Poland comes into the NATO assembly and asks to invoke Article 5, which needs unanimous consent across all 32 nations, Article 5 is a constitution of attack on one is an attack on all. And actually, there's been one other time that this has been invoked. Many people don't know Article 5 was invoked for the 9/11 that happened here in the United States. So it is a possibility that could rear its ugly head again. I hope it doesn't, because if it turns into a full scale war like that, it's not going to be good for anyone. But on the other side, Ukraine is kicking some arse right now.
And that's another thing to look at too. Is Russia wants to play like this? They're this big bad country, but if you look at the reports coming out, especially in the earlier time of the war when the war first started, the reports were that they were using old Cold War era weapons until they were getting mutual aid from other countries like China or whatever. Russia is losing a lot in this war. They're losing a lot of people, a lot of equipment. They've lost over 790,000 men and women.
I'm
Either
gonna back you up a little bit. You want to know the funny part about the mutual aid they're getting from other countries, aka
let's hear,
Belarus and North Korea?
yeah.
This is munitions that Russia sold to North Korea and Belarus like 10 years ago. They're reselling it back. And never
Yeah,
mind that, the economic sanctions that are being put on to Russia right now.
oh, I know they're feeling it definitely. But if you look at the numbers, right? So in April 2025, sources cited that there was over 790,000 Russian troops either killed and injured. Between killed and injured, 190. And then you look at the Ukraine side, oh, there was only 400,000. Little Ukraine they are packing the punch.
Well, not only that, additionally, Ukraine has been taking aim at Russian fuel storages using a mix of missiles and drones and causing a massive fuel shortage in Russia. And now, with NATO starting to pull back on Russian gas and oil and purchasing from the United States, thank you, Trump, for actually saying something, because why were they still buying from them? They're just helping fund the war. But now that all this is happening, we're going into the winter months. They're in the same hemisphere as us. So as we start to tilt back and turn into winter, so do they. What do you think this fuel shortage is going to do to the Russian military and civilians as we progress further and further into winter?
This is going to hit them where the sun don't shine. This is literally no fuel, no heat. I'm sorry to say it. No fuel, no heat. It's simple as that. Look what happened last winter. Russia knocked the power out of Ukraine. So they went through a dark winter. Do you think that the Ukrainians are going to try to do that to the Russians this time? I mean, they're already flying drones into Moscow.
Yeah. No, I think they're going to do it. And I think that's specifically why Ukraine is targeting fuel storage sites now. They know they're coming into the winter months. They're going to start needing that. Primary source of heating over there is natural gas. How do you start making the civilians feel the hurt? And what happens when civilians feel the hurt of war? They start acting out. So they're starting to play a four-dimensional chess. They're going to play the battlefront. They're going to play the battlefront in Moscow. And then they're going to use psychological warfare to engage the Russian public to start uprising. You can't handle that. We learned from the Nazis. Nazi Germany tried to fight a battle on two fronts. It didn't work well. Well, now you're going to be fighting a battle technically on three fronts. You now have to protect your fuel storage sites, which is going to take manpower and fuel. You're going to have to project that power still out to Ukraine. And now you're going to have to deal with your civilian uprising. So it's a four-dimensional chess that I don't think Russia's going to be able to handle. I think we might see an end to the war. There's two ways this is going to play out. Russia's either going to end it and just be like, I can't do this no more, which I think is unlikely, or Russia's going to try and go nuclear.
Yeah, and that's a very scary thing to think of. And if you look at the stuff that the Russian military is doing to civilians in Ukraine, it is terrible stuff. I mean, look what the massacre in I don't know if I'm saying this right, but Bucha. There was there was evidence of executions and tortures to civilians, and there was multiple mass graves found. They're abducting and deporting children back to Russia to train them to fight against their own people. You know, there was the UN investigators found evidence of widespread torture and sexual violence in territories controlled by Russian forces. Attacks on civilian infrastructure. I mean, they're doing double tap strikes. You know, they strike a location, they wait a few minutes, and then they strike again to kill, you know, first responders and rescuers and journalists. I mean, if this is the definition of war crimes. What do you think there?
No, I 100% agree. It's all a definition of war crimes. Now, one thing I am happy with, Ukraine is currently working on a deal, and I believe it's been accepted. It's just got to go through a few other little items. But the U.S. is going to be giving Ukraine the HIMARS system. For people that don't know, that is a surface to surface missile defense system with a range of 186 miles and an accuracy of within 3 feet. I think this will deal a deathly blow to the Russian war mission. What do you think about them getting the HIMARS system and us giving them more military equipment if it keeps the U.S. out of the war?
Well, I think it can go two ways, right? We can give these guys the equipment they need to defend themselves and their sovereignty and to protect their people, and they win the war, right? Or we give them the equipment and then Russia starts striking on Poland or another NATO country, or, you know, they're already threatening the United States. If you do that, you're going to regret it. Are you fearful at all that Putin might pull the nuclear there? Are you worried about that at all? I mean, I'm a little concerned here.
I don't like the thought of Putin on the nuclear button. I wish he would keep nukes out of the ordeal. And this is why I think once this is all over, we need to do a global campaign to get rid of nuclear armament because nukes don't make anyone safe. All it does is promise mutual destruction. And that's across the board. All nukes do is promise that everybody's going to die on the planet. Now, I like it, and I'm not necessarily worried about Russian threats to the United States. Just looking at how they've put military advances together, how their equipment's running. People will talk about the US being the most powerful military nation this earth has ever seen. And they're right. Do you know what makes us so powerful, Dave?
What's that, Josh?
We have support assets for our support assets for our support assets. It's the support and logistics of our military that allows us to project power with such strength and ability. Russia doesn't have that. Russia's having problems getting fuel, armament, food to their troops. During World War II, the US and the UK alike, while the Berlin Wall was up, there was a section that couldn't get food directly because of where Russia was situated. At one point, we were making shuttle runs in via aircraft, and it was crazy amounts of food. And we were able to do it because of that same logic, the support assets for our support assets for our support assets. And not only that, the military warfare that Russia fights is we're just going to throw people at it. We're just going to keep throwing people. Well, you're going to run out of people at some point. I hate saying that because it sounds gruesome, and it is gruesome. Not only that, when the first days of the war came out, do you remember seeing that 30-mile long straight path of tank column?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
You want to know what the U.S. would have done in that situation?
What's that?
We would have sent our good old friend, the A-10 Warthog, which is pretty much a 30 millimeter Gatling gun with wings. That's the entire plane. You're sitting in an iron bathtub with a 30 mil Gatling gun. And we would have just sent 10 of them and scraped the line. You don't They don't have the military knowledge that the US does. And if they do, they're not using it properly because they would have known not to make a straight line with 30 miles of tanks.
Yeah, no, I agree. And do you think that the International Criminal Court should hold Putin liable for all these, what we consider war crimes being committed against the Ukrainian people? I mean, even the New York Post reported, I think it was last week or the week before, they were branding Ukrainian hostages with glory to Russia or something like that. Do you think that Putin should be held liable for this?
Absolutely. And not only Putin, I think anybody in his defense ministry that was part of the creation and execution of this war, I believe anybody on the ground that is committing those branding, essays, anything that violates regular, moral, reasonable ethics should be charged in criminal court. If the US had military members inside a country that were doing this, even with the direction of its superiors, they would be charged too. And I believe the International Criminal Court should. And if they don't, the U.S. should push for it.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And and I want to put out there that if Ukraine was doing the same thing, we would have the same opinion. It wouldn't change based because it's off on the other foot. No. If you're committing these war crimes, you should be held liable. Now, Josh, where do you see this war going within the next 6 months to a year? Where do you think we're going to be?
In the next 6 months, I think one, you're going to start seeing the troubles really start to pile up for Russia. If Ukraine is able to continue putting warheads on strategic points such as fuel storages, you're going to start seeing a critical breakdown in military infrastructure. So you're not going to be able to fuel your tanks, your armored personnel carriers, your tow behind or your self-propelled missile pads. All of those systems will become rendered unusable. Now, if for some reason Ukraine isn't able to keep up the ante, I still think you're going to see more trouble from Russia having these ability with the damage that's already done. If Russia continues to encroach on Poland in the coming, honestly, if I see it continuing over the next month, I think NATO will get involved. If NATO gets involved, you're going to see it play out quick. And I think it'll be a fast ending to the war if NATO gets involved, especially now that every country is putting forth the 5% that is needed. So, and NATO currently is, like I said before, posing for that launch into war mode if they ever have to go into that. So, in a moment's notice, Russia will be able to, or not Russia, but NATO will be able to inflict pain via military strength. I don't think you will ever see Putin surrender. What I may think you'll see is Putin may go into hiding, kind of like Hitler did in his last days. And that's currently where I stand on it. I don't see it ending with a peace deal. I think you're going to have to use brute strength and boots on the ground.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and I hope I hope we can come to a deal to kind of close this out because innocent people are dying every day, and it sucks. But like you said, I don't see Putin coming to an end here, and I don't see him surrendering at all. And I don't want to see it, but I think you're going to see NATO get involved in the next few months or so. And it's going to be the next few months are going to be a very dangerous time in that vicinity. Had a problem saying that.
Talking about war, something that could turn into one, and Venezuela's kind of been posing for this. What is your opinion on what is happening with the Venezuelan drug boats and the U.S. airstriking them from above?
Well, here's the thing. These drug smuggling has a profound and devastating effect, not just on America, but the world in general. It's impacting our public health, the economy, our national security, and community safety. It fuels addiction and violence, overburdens the justice and healthcare system, and funds dangerous criminal organizations. Every person in America knows somebody who is either on drugs, taking drugs, have been overdosed from drugs, or has died from drugs. Everybody has known this. The surging overdose deaths has gone insane. And who's to fault for this? The cartels and the drug smugglers bringing this into America. This has increased addiction in the world, not just America, the world. Addiction has increased, and the spread of diseases have spread a lot more than it used to. The drug trafficking contributes to the public health issues and the spread of diseases such as HIV, hepatitis, that are often shared through needles.
Now, some by the numbers for you because I did a lot of research for people that are saying that these drug dealers that or these drug boats, they shouldn't be on the state-sponsored terror, or they shouldn't be on this terror watch list, and they shouldn't be, they're not violent. Let me put some numbers forth for you because it is violent. Anything involving drugs is violent. Provisional data from CDC shows that 80,499 people died from drug overdose in 2024. From 2021 to 2024, law enforcement reported more than 69,000 incidents involving gang activities, murders, aggravated assaults, rapes, robberies, just in total from gang violence. Now, gang violence is a lot attributed to they were selling drugs on my turf. Let's also go by the numbers of what's been brought into the country. Over 5,500 pounds of fentanyl were seized in the first 2 months of this fiscal year. By the end of November of 2024, over 7,500 pounds of fentanyl had been seized. Additionally, 21,148 pounds of fentanyl were seized at the southwest border. This is just fentanyl. This isn't including heroin, cocaine, crack, meth. These are large sums of drugs. And fentanyl, it doesn't take much. You take a salt shaker and pour a little bit on your hand, and that's enough to kill you.
Tip of a pen, that's all it takes. The tip of a pencil, that's all it takes.
There's a reason they prescribe it in micrograms at hospitals, not grams, not millimeters, or not millimeters, but milliliters, micrograms. It is potent stuff. And wherever drugs go, that's also where illegal firearms are. You get murders, as this said, rapes, robberies, anything. If it is related to drugs, doesn't even have to be the drug itself. It is violent just in its nature. So I 100% agree with Trump putting them on the terror watch list.
No, I agree, and I think any country has the right to dismantle or even take out drug smuggling boats coming through the ocean. Because where are they headed? They're not headed back to Venezuela. They're headed towards our coastline, other countries' coastlines, where people are gonna buy this stuff. People are gonna buy. They're gonna become addicted, and they're gonna need it to survive. I mean, down here in Boston, you go down to Methadone Mile down there on Mass Ave, Mass and Cass. I mean, look at the devastation. What comes with it? Homelessness, mental health crisis. I mean, this is just drugs are the center of the epidemic in the world, and not just in America. It's not an American problem. This is a worldwide problem. So yes, it's affecting the American people. America has the right to defend its people.
So do you think, actually, it's not more of a do you think, what do you think it tells us about Venezuela that they're puffing their chests out to the United States and saying, this is wrong, you shouldn't be doing that? What does that tell you about the Venezuelan government?
Well, that tells you that they're running the show. They are the center of they're the big boss. They're the center of the operation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and an interesting fact, it's not just the United States that's involved in this. Yes, it is the U.S. Coast Guard. Yes, it is the U.S. Navy. But a new development on this, French naval warships have now been sent to the Gulf of America.
Yeah, and this proves that it's not just an American problem. This is a worldwide problem. Other countries are getting involved. Why? Because it is affecting their population and their people as well. And we have a right to defend our people. When recent data shows that, 12 months prior to March 2025, there were 77,600 overdoses in the United States itself. Just within the United States. 12 months, 600 overdoses. These are brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, nieces, nephews. I mean, this isn't like strangers. Everybody in the world knows somebody either on drugs, taking drugs, or has been overdosed or a victim of drugs.
Now, the other question I have is, I was hearing a lot of reports. I haven't done a lot of investigation on this end, but I've been hearing that Trump has now agreed to send $2 billion to Venezuela. What is your opinion if we are going to send $2 billion in aid to Venezuela on this?
Does it say what the aid is for? I haven't seen this yet.
Now, like I said, I haven't done a ton of digging. It was just something new that had popped up. I just wanted to get your initial reaction, just in general, of us sending aid, any aid, even if it's humanitarian aid. Should we be sending any sort of aid to Venezuela currently?
No. The answer is no. Why? Until they curb the smuggling of drugs into our country, the smuggling of drugs into other countries, why should we be giving them anything? That's like me giving you $100 and still robbing you. I mean, listen, it is insane. That's like you giving me money and I'm robbing you behind your back. You don't know it. No. Why would you? That's like, killing someone in your family and then saying, hey, do you have $100 I could borrow? Can you bail me out? Can you bail me out of prison, Josh? I know I just murdered one of your family members, but can you bail me out today? No. The answer is no. Until the leader, was it Maduro? Is that his name? Is that how you say it? Until he comes forth and it comes to an agreement to stop the smuggling and agrees to help us in the efforts to destroy the organizations and the cartels running the organizations to smuggle drugs into our country and other countries? The answer is no. They should be getting nothing from us.
So currently, what I am seeing on this is only Trump is taking credit for Venezuela's economic issues, considering the tax burden that he put on. Okay, so incorrect information. Again, got to verify sources here. Trump claims 2 billion daily in tariffs on revenue from Venezuela.
I see. We should be hitting them with as much economic pressure as possible to get them to help stop this epidemic. That's what we should really be doing.
So, in this instance, let me put it this way. Do you agree with the tariffs, the heavy tariffs that we have put on Venezuela and their oil? And do you think it's justified with the financial crisis that we have put them in?
Yes. Yes, it is. This is devastating our people. Yes. Sanction the shit out of them. Put every sanction possible. Get them to get on their knees and bow to us and say, what do you need us to do? Well, we need you to stop the drugs coming across. Stop allowing these organizations to kill our people. And then we'll start lifting our foot off the gas pedal and start pressing the brakes. And again, I'll say it again. Sanction the shit out of them.
No, I agree. So, what else does the flow of drugs across the border do? And I'm going to also put this in place. The War Powers Act does not explicitly say that the president cannot do this. In fact, it's an argument more of forward because they are acting in a terrorist right. So, what is also your reaction to the left outcrying that what Trump is doing is so wrong?
Again, this to fill the problem with the left is they're not against curbing the flow of drugs. They're not against doing what Trump is doing. They're anti-Trump. That's all it is. It's just being anti-Trump. And everything he does is criticism.
Are you telling me they have TDS?
Yes. Trump derangement system syndrome. Yes, they do. They absolutely do, though. If you look at it. Obama was hard on cartels, but Trump is, and those poor cartel members, their family. Oh, you can't put them in jail because family separation. Are you kidding me? Meanwhile, drugs coming across the border are devastating our citizens. People are getting so addicted they can't make their rent payments, their mortgage payments. They're losing their houses, living on the street. Now they have mental issues, killing their children. I mean, people are losing their parents. They're losing their grandparents, their aunts, uncles, children. Children are being killed before they're even born. Why? Because they experienced a pen tip of fentanyl. That's why. Or how about first responders when they're doing a pat down on somebody and they get stuck with a needle and now they're stuck with HIV, hepatitis for the rest of their life? I mean, look at what drugs is doing. And we're not talking about, smoking weed. Obviously, that's not the big problem here. The problem is the heroin, the synthetic stuff, fentanyl, stuff that's being made. And, and do you think, Josh, do you think China should be held liable? Because I heard that they have a lot of stuff that they, supply to help cut that what they use to cut these drugs with too. I mean, they're part of the problem too. Do you think that China will step in to help Venezuela curb us from destroying these smuggling boats?
I think they possibly will. Now, do I think it's in their best interest to do something like this? No. And I say this because if China and US get into a conflict, and this is partly why they don't go to war in Taiwan, because they know the US is backing Taiwan. Another topic for another day. Yes, because it hurts the American people. No, because they hold so much US debt. So it'll collapse their economy if it goes too far. But I think it is in the Chinese interest to try and help fund these drugs, make the US weaker so they can become the top military in the world. And that's currently their aim because they're more of a brown water military. But I think China will continue to support Venezuela in the manufacturing of drugs. And I believe the US should hold them accountable. It is an act of war. Do something with the intention to hurt the American people. It is an act of war. Protecting the American people is the first and foremost obligation of the US government.
No, and I agree with you. I do agree with you. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And these drugs that these drugs are affecting their own countries as well. It's not like, they're immune to this. So I don't understand why they're pro pushing these drugs.
Because China does not care about their own people.
Well, that's a bigger problem we could talk about in another episode. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to Overcaffeinated and Dysfunctional episode number 4. We're already on number 4. Make sure you give us a like and follow on all of our social media platforms: X, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, etc. Click the link in the description below for our link tree, and make sure to give us a follow and a like. Thanks again. Peace.
And don't forget, if you want your question to be part of our In the Hot Seat segment, shoot us a comment. We might just answer your question. Thank you all.